Good evening. This is again Monday evening, and my name is Mark Miller, and this is the Career Pivot Office Hours. Today's topic is will technology affect your job or eliminate your job? The answer is probably.
Yes, probably.
Again, my name is Mark Miller. I am the owner of Career Pivot. I have my lovely sidekick, Elizabeth. I'll let Elizabeth introduce her.
My name is Elizabeth. I live here in Austin, Texas, and work as a marketing coordinator for an environmental engineering firm. I also help Mark out with social media and campaigns and in blogs and such. So do a little bit of everything. So I appreciate being able to be part of his team. So we're glad that everybody joined us tonight. This looks good, and and we have lots to talk about.
So I'm going to lock the seat until, and where I want to kind of started this is my history. I actually graduated with an engineering degree in 1978. And if you remember, in the early 1980s is when the rise of the Japanese, we thought the Japanese were going to take over the world. They were doing robotics. They were in the process of automating their automobile industry. And I was fortunate back in the mid-1980s, I was working in a mechanical design group. And IBM decided they were going to automate the Lexington, Kentucky typewriter plant. And it was typewriters, printers, what it later became Lexmark. And it was complete and utter disaster. What they discovered is if a product wasn't built to be manufactured by a robot, it made no sense. So this is where early manufacturing involvement got started. And actually, I was involved in the late 1980s with the IBM Pro Printer. I was a support. I provided mechanical design support. And the Pro Printer was the first PC printer that was designed to be manufactured by a robot. It was 23 parts, one screw.
Oh my.
One fastener.
Okay.
So it snapped together, and in the end, it put one screw in. And the issue was screws were, if a robot put a screw in, it didn't go. The only thing it knew to do was take the screw out, grab a new one, put a new one in. And what they discovered was if they designed something to be easily manufactured by a robot, it could be easily manufactured by a human.
Okay.
And so, therefore, the key piece was designing things to be easily to be manufactured, put together. Okay, so that was the 1990s. Okay, then what happened? China started opening to manufacturing. And manufacturing, so what happened is, it wasn't robotics that were moving to China. It was manufacturing was moving to China. It was stuff that was built by hand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The cheap labor. And so by time we were looking at 2000, 2001, by the way, I spent a lot of time in China between 2000 and 2003. It was manual manufacturing going over. And what's since happened there is wages have gone up in China.
Yes, they have. The rise of the middle class.
Right. And now we're seeing manufacturing come back with no jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're seeing the fact that they can now automate all this, because again, the key piece here was they built these products to be easily put together. So what we're seeing out of the Great Recession was a lot of stuff coming back, but with no jobs.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense to spend the money to automate. So the idea here is, will your job be replaced by a robot? The answer is when it financially makes sense. Because it's all driven by cost of goods and labor. So a classic example of this is after 9/11. If you traveled before year Y2K and you went to an airport, there were tons of people working there. Then we had 9/11. Costs went up, security, And what do we have today? You have very few jobs in the airport. Everything has been automated. You now can have your ticket right here on your phone. I can walk into the airport. I go to a kiosk. So this is all affected by by costs.
Yes.
Similarly, we are going to see the same thing happen as we go to $15 an hour minimum wage. And we're already going to see this in fast food restaurants. We're going to see more kiosks, but more importantly, why can't I order my hamburger directly from here?
Well, and I had an experience about something similar to that a couple months ago. I was at an airport, and where I wanted to get some food, and at every table was a tablet, an iPad tablet, and there was pictures of all kinds of food and the prices, and then it also recommended drinks and other dishes to accompany that. So I placed all my order using iPad, and it was whisked away, and then lo and behold, there came this person with my food, and I got my food, and if I wanted more, I had to use the iPad. When I closed out my account, it was all done, using that piece of technology. There was no people interaction other than, I think, once or twice they came by to see if everything was okay. So it's already started.
Yes, I mean, we're expecting a lot of technology to replace service level jobs. Again, a lot of it's going to be driven by $15 an hour minimum wage, which I'm all for $15 an hour minimum wage, but it also has unintended consequences. But one of the interesting ones was I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago related to Texas Workforce Solutions, which is this Texas privatized agency that looks at where people are working in economics. And the interesting one, the group that has the highest unemployment for a well-educated group is lawyers.
Okay.
The demand for lawyers continues to drop. And this comes from everything from who's done anything on LegalZoom.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
You get your wills. I mean, for years ago, I bought a program to do my mother's will. The same thing with being able to do legal research.
Starting a corporation or company for legal incorporation papers. Mm-hmm.
Yep. There's so many things that are going to affect. And so therefore, it's interesting. I have a nephew who graduated with a law degree in right at the height of the recession. And best I know, he's still not fully employed. I know he's still living at home. I really don't know his situation, but it's been rough. And one of the things they talked about at the Texas Workforce Solutions was law schools are not slowing down spitting out lawyers. Mm. And they have very high unemployment rates nationwide. So therefore, a law degree does not guarantee you employment. Mm-hmm. And so the other one I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to throw it over to Elizabeth, is the IT. You figure anybody in IT has got to be secure. Well, if you're a programmer, if you're an IT administrator, as things move to the cloud, I use the classic example is our local school district. They were a big Lotus Domino shop. Their IBM Lotus, they had all their email, and IBM Lotus has always been big in government and higher ed and education. And I think about 5 years ago, they moved all of that to Google. They got rid of all their servers. They have no raised floor space anymore. They eliminated about 3/4 of their administrators because they just didn't need them. And this is an organization that relies on, on a very high level of privacy. I'm sorry, gone.
Yeah.
So, the traditional IT is not necessarily as safe as you think. So, Elizabeth, I know you wrote in your article about medical.
Yes, I did some research on the possibility of technology replacing jobs in terms of the medical field, and one that the one example that stands out the most for me was I heard someone speak, as well as I read about this. IBM, who created Watson, the computer that has done multiple things. First of all, it played chess and won, and then they moved it to Jeopardy and won on Jeopardy. So, and then finally, they're taking the Watson to the medical field, which at that place they will enter in data, all kinds of data about different illnesses, from medical journals, from people's lab reports, from medical records, and anything that can be related to a specific type of illness or disease or whatever. And they'll dump it in all to this computer, and based upon the algorithms, they will help you determine if somebody new comes and you tell the computer these are the situation, these are the symptoms, the computer will most likely spit out an answer telling you what type of disease and what type of the treatment is. And so this is helpful because not all doctors cannot know everything or have to, or be able to read and stay up to date and all this stuff. So to have that as a resource, I think is amazing for the medical field, to keep track of that, to keep on top of that, and to be able to be used, I think is amazing.
Yeah, one of the discussions, Elizabeth and I both belong to the same breakfast club, Metropolitan Breakfast Club, and we had the dean of the new University of Texas Medical School come in, and one of the things he talked about was they are no longer emphasizing the need to memorize in training new doctors. And there are a lot of folks in that room who are my age and a little bit older going, oh my gosh. And the reality is you probably at some point will start replacing some doctors for diagnosing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting one was some of the articles you quoted in the blog post was related to empathy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Related to
nurses?
Yes, nurses will probably be kept because they will need to empathize with the patient and be there and be the caregiver. Some of the things in terms of the medical field, you can't just use a computer to solve. And I still think you need the people touch for the basic human interaction, human comfort, human making them feel welcome and at ease while they're going through this, while they're processing their information that's perhaps coming from a computer. So I think nurses are probably going to be okay.
Yep. Tony asked, how do you feel about EQ in medicine, which I'm presuming is emotional, I don't know what Q stands for.
Quotient?
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no question that, it was one article that was talking about that you can't, those people who are dealing directly with the patient, where there's empathy involved and emotions, that won't be eliminated.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thought. The other topic I wanted to talk about was accounting. The need for accountants is going to decrease pretty dramatically. I even use my example is I have my buddy Kay McManus does my books,
mm-hmm.
and the way we work together is I just put my receipts, which are all electronic.
Mm-hmm.
I put them in Dropbox in a folder, and once a month, I tell her I put a spreadsheet with all my bank statement, my PayPal, and my credit card, and she goes does her thing. The days of handling lots of paper, and it is gone.
Yes.
And it's going to make, number one, are you going to need as many bookkeepers? Probably not.
No.
We're already seeing with tax returns. And the fact is, what tax tips do you have?
Make sure you
I'm
pay
the
them.
last person. Yeah.
Make sure you pay them.
Yeah. Don't do Obamacare. At least don't take a tax credit. Boy, that nailed me in the butt last year. And so the whole idea here is, well, I think it's been interesting. Intuit's been advertising doing your taxes for free on your phone.
Yep.
Have you seen those commercials?
Yes. Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, look, you can do your taxes now on your computer. You don't have to go to an accountant. Everything is all right there. You answer the questions, fill in the number, and out pops your completed tax form. Or even not even that, you can just send it directly to the IRS where it's processed at their facility. Gone are the days with the people that would sit there row after row, processing these big paper documents. So I mean, it's being streamlined through the use of electronic documents in many ways. So
yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of accounting. It's interesting, in the past few years, if you took your tax return to your accountant, very likely they would ship it over to India and somebody over there would do it. What we're seeing now is so much of this stuff is being done, and I think Stan says federal is free, state and saving is for fee with TurboTax. Yeah, well, we don't have any state income tax. That's why I live in Texas. So yeah, the whole idea with even bookkeeping, QuickBooks is now in the cloud, and so it's become progressive. It's allowed people to be anywhere. In fact, it's interesting. I was interviewed by a gentleman, believe it or not, whose name is Winston Churchill, not Winston Churchill. And one of the things he taught people to do was, in retirement, move outside of the U.S., but continue to do business in the U.S. And he was in Guadalajara, Mexico, doing a variety of architecture processing for people in Los Angeles, living in a much lower cost place. And he can do that because of the internet, Dropbox, Skype, Blab, all these technologies, and living in a less costly place, and continue to be able to do that. And bookkeeping is one of those things that can be done. One of the last things I wanted to talk about is truck drivers. There was a really cool article that I have a contact who's in Korea. I think she's Australian, but she sent me about there's a big pit mine in outside of Perth, where they have these humongous, huge trucks that don't have drivers anymore. They all put GPSs in them, and they and they're all controlled from Perth. There's a single control room. They've got about 30 or 40 of these massive trucks, and they don't have any drivers.
Those are the very big trucks. The tires are about as tall as a man, if not taller.
Oh, no, they're like 3 or 4 times as tall as a man. I mean, they're enormous. Yeah, they're enormous. Yeah. And the fact is, we're going to see a lot more of that. In fact, similar to that is I've got a client of mine who went to Houston to drive trains, and he's back here, and now he's training to drive. He's a trained pilot, so he's training to be a drone pilot. And Elizabeth works for an environmental engineering company, and the opportunity for drones is enormous.
It is. I mean, you could take those drones out to a tank farm that has hundreds of tanks, these big, 500,000 gallon tanks, and you could fly over your tanks and do visual inspections, see if there's any leaks or rust or whatever. Or you could also attach instrumentation on there to determine if there's leaks in terms of like the different gases or from petroleum products or whatever, and monitor that. And you wouldn't have to have people climbing up and down. The insurance liability would go down. The people doing that wouldn't have to be as many, because because you could have one or two people doing that. Once you mapped out a grid, you could just go for it. And also out in the oil fields, in those remote, desolate places, you could, fly your drone over and check out an oil rig and see if it's doing okay and if it's being, if there's problems with it. So yeah, there's a lot of possibilities with that.
Yeah, I think, particularly as you start seeing more and more sophisticated instrumentation go on the drones, I think you'll be surprised at what could be replaced. But I got one other for you that I want you to think about.
Okay.
What happens when every car has collision avoidance on it?
Wow.
Which right now Mercedes and and BMW and Volvo are all advertising. And by the way, over time that will come pervasive. And the automakers are working on car-to-car communications so that your vehicle knows where other vehicles are around it. So let's say you eliminated, you eliminate 40% of all collisions. What happens to parts dealers? What happens to insurance? What happens to body shops? And it could be much higher than 40%. But just let's take a modest, 40% decrease. You think your job as an insurance adjuster is safe? Well, maybe not. We're going to see a lot of what we call secondary effects as technology comes in. And again, I believe that it's going to take probably 25 years, because right now people are holding on to cars a lot longer for a lot of these systems to come into place. But even there, if Uber gets their way and they get driverless cars, what will that do to the whole industry around fixing cars and repairing cars after accidents? Will they eliminate, bad weather accidents? I don't have any idea, but I guarantee you that will have a ripple effect, not just into the auto repair, but in the insurance and finance.
That is true. Yes.
If cars don't get wrecked and people are able to successfully pay off their cars, what does that mean? And all of that is going to have massive ripple effects down through the economy. And by the way, I haven't got a clue what it means.
Yeah, that's a pretty big picture to paint.
Right?
Yeah.
And so expect more of that. It's no different than, by the way, who remembers when you actually had a phone with a cord on it? That you actually plugged into the wall.
Yes.
That wasn't that long ago.
No.
And that all has gone away very rapidly. So, and that is having after effects on all kinds of, by the way, it's having a big, number one, it's a big effect on, has a big effect on state governments and how they tax.
Yep.
So Elizabeth, do you have anything else to add?
I think we've gotten a lot of items on the table, and I'm curious to see what other people have to say. We talked about medical profession, IT, accountants, lawyers, engineers. So
Yep.
I don't know who have we left out, and I'm curious to see what our audience thinks or has to
So
say.
I'm going to stop the recording, so you won't be recorded, and so here we go. I'll turn it off.
I'm here.
I'm just going to add the end of the recording is the fact that next week we're going to talk about books.
Yes.
And I've done a couple of blog posts on some books. I did a blog post on 5 books that 5 career books that have nothing to do with careers, and we're going to add a few more to that list for my bestseller list. And so next week we'll be talking about books that yes, you probably may or may not know about. But I know I've read them all, and Elizabeth has read a number of them.
Yes. Yeah, it should be a
And
good
then-
discussion. There are timeless books
Yep.
that you can use now and in the future. So,
Yep.
so join us.
So look for you next week. Again, this is Mark Miller and Elizabeth Rebay with Career Pivot. And good night.
Good night, everyone.